Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Harebrained Games. This is a special episode at the end of the year to cover my top 10 games of 2017. Now, before Christmas, I did my top light games, top medium games, and my top heavy games. What I haven't done yet are a couple of the other lists, but I'm going to start with this one because it's the end of the year, and, well, like everybody and their brother's doing one. So we're going to get right onto it with our top 10 games of 2017. All right, number 10 is a game, Tournament at Camelot. Now, Tournament at Camelot is a trick-taking game that has a special twist on it that leverages the Arthurian legend. Camelot and Arthur and Guinevere, etc., etc. Now, the point of this game is to make people take tricks because those tricks add up to damage. Now, that's a little interesting. Every trick-taking game has a different penchant or bias or whatever. This one's interesting because you have a special power as whoever you're playing. If you're Arthur, you have a special power. Guinevere, you have a special power. And as you're playing these cards, what you're trying to do is not be the one tasked to take the trick, because if you do, all of that is a damage, and you have like 400 points of damage, so it's not like you play 2 games and you're done. It's going to go around the table. And the other thing is, once you take a certain amount of damage, you flip over and suddenly you have sort of a superpowered ability that tries to help push you back into the game, or at least make you more powerful, so that you're not just a runaway winner victim. And so number 10, Tournament at Camelot. Number 9. Number 9 is a game that holds a special place in my heart, a tiny heart, tiny game, Tiny Epic Quest. Now, Tiny Epic Quest is a series of games: Tiny Epic Western, Tiny Epic Galaxies, Tiny Epic Defenders, etc., etc. What makes Quest different is that it sort of harkens back to the Legend of Zelda, the old Legend of Zelda top-down 2D games, where you're traveling around and you're going through dungeons and temples, or you're trying to hunt marauding bandits over the course of a large map. Tiny Epic Quest is not something that you think will fit. It's not for a small table. It's might be tiny, but it's definitely epic in the footprint. It takes the whole table. The sprawling map, which I'll show you here, is really filled with a lot of stuff, yet it's not that complex. It's not like it's interesting because you have cards split into 4 quadrants, but really only 2 of those quadrants, the left and the right side, are actually relevant. That's a little interesting twist. It's not as high on my list as others. I think that actually I would like to see a little bit more Zelda-ish kind of play here to go with it. I think it actually could be iterated upon in a way that makes it even more compelling to me. But it's still a really good game, probably my favorite in the series. And so number 9, Epic, Tiny Epic Quest. Number 8 is a game that takes and does the opposite of Tiny Epic Quest. It's called Lisboa. Lisboa is a game that has a sprawling morass of components and pieces and gears and pulleys all working together. What makes it special is that it is, like all of his games, and I've described it as this before, an hourglass game where you look, taking the time, setting up the board itself feels like a game, that you're a pre-game, and then you're done and you're like, do I really want to do this? And then you find out that you really only have 3 or 4 major core actions you can do on your turn, and the turns go by fairly quickly as far as your decision. You make a pretty obvious decision. You have 4 choices, 4 or so, and that's it. And so you get this little, and then that choice, you think, oh, well, that was easy, but then it suddenly juts out, and that one choice can have a major impact as ripple effects happen all over the place. That one action can have many, many subroutines, subparts that go on that alter the board in creative and amazing ways. Once again, the designer Vital Lacerda continues to impress me. Galleria, Viticulture, you name it. The dude abides with a different type and style of game that just really hits home in a unique and clever way. So number 8, Lisboa. Number 7 is a game That's probably the closest thing to a cardboard Diablo, and that is Massive Darkness. Massive Darkness is a role-playing game where you take a character and you're pounding your way through dungeons. Unlike a lot of like dungeon crawling kind of games, of which I have many, this one simplifies it down to in really clever ways. Now, I'm not really liking the campaign. There are missions in the campaign. The campaign, unfortunately, I feel is incredibly imbalanced in ways I did not. It was just, yeah, I think that was probably an afterthought. But that doesn't stop the scenarios themselves, the different missions you set up, to be really wildly entertaining. You will level up your hero, and your hero will get special powers and collect loot and take on monsters, and you'll feel overwhelmed, but you feel powerful. It does everything Diablo does. It hits the sweet spot of that Diablo. I'm powerful, and I can take on many things, but it's not a cakewalk either. So, number 7, Massive Darkness. Okay, number 6 is a game that I haven't mentioned much, but that has a great impact. It's one that really took me by storm when it came out, and it's called Nemos War. Nemos War is, by and large, a solo game where you are Captain Nemo, and you are charged, depending on which variant of objectives you have, to go across the world in your submarine and do all kinds of things, to take adventures, fight against the countries that are going after you, explore. There's a lot to it. If you've read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, you're going to see a lot of familiar things here. And yet it's got one of the best luck-driven, luck-mitigating gameplay designs that I've seen. I love it because it's chaos, but it's controlled. You get to decide the risks more often than the risks just take over for you. You have a lot of leverage in how you want things to go up. And I never played this game through without feeling like I made choices that either determined my victory or my defeat. Even with the dice, it was on me. Some of it's preparatory mitigation, like I want everything ready. I want to put everything in I can. And then there's occasional ways that you can retroactively react to a bad roll, but they're very few. So it really is tense. It really is thematic. It's fantastic. Solo game, so you won't be, there is a way to play with others. I just can't see myself doing it. So, number 6, Nemos War. Okay, number 5. I don't have a lot of World War I games. I have a couple, but in general, World War I is kind of the forgotten war, and I personally think World War I and World War II really were almost the same, really, war. With a long-running armistice that was chaotic. I don't think you can talk about one without talking about the other. But anyway, Fields of Despair by GMT is a rip-roaring variation on that. And when I say rip-roaring, I mean it's crazy. It's a really interesting design. I don't know of any other game that I have of this particular designer. I don't know if he's even done anything other than this, but high quality components, really riveting stuff. You feel like World War I. They definitely grabbed the attention of World War I. It feels like it's not World War II. You're not running around with tons of mobility. When you hunker down in those trenches, you're hunkered down. Now that could get mundane and boring if you really want to think about it, because that's what it was. Mundane, boring, and filled with death. But this does a great job of setting up so that you are making big scale choices. It's a block game. Big scale choices and tons of dice. You're rolling like a boatload of dice. That part is weird, and you almost get kind of a little role playing to it. You get to upgrade a few things as time goes on. It's one of the ones where the longer the war goes, the less you have at your disposal, which is true to life, but not necessarily something that you normally see. Normally, like as the war drags on, you come up with better technologies and stuff, which it does happen here. But World War I is a war of exhaustion for everybody, and this really captures that. So, Fields of Despair, number 5. Okay, we're down to our 4. Number 4 is The Godfather. It would be wise for you to have obtained a copy. Yeah, okay, that was terrible. Anyway, The Godfather is a simplified, I almost feel like it's Lords of Waterdeep, almost Ticket to Ride kind of thing a little bit, in that you're really going for missions. You're trying to do jobs, and those jobs give you money, and ultimately it comes down to money, and you get little tin suitcases that you're going to use to store your money. But it's simple enough that even like casual gamers could play this game and not feel like they had to know the lore. They had to know everything about the Godfather. It's not. In some ways, I think that might turn off Godfather people. I did a review of this, and I already explained that. I think that people that were looking for some sort of crafted Godfather narrative story thing, probably not going to find it here. This really isn't about that. But it's still a highly entertaining game where you're earning money, and it's simpler than it looks, but then it's also still satisfying, particularly when you send some of your opponents to the river and send their little guys to the river. Like, okay, that's total Godfather. Anyway, number 4 is Godfather. Number 3 is a definite favorite of mine. I've been generally pleased with games by Ryan Lockett, who tends to do some very clever and creative things, although they tend to be relatively simplified, sometimes a little bit too much for me. This is not that way. Near and Far is a game that really just took over for me. I have played the other, like Above and Below, Islebound, etc., our previous games, but Near and Far is a narrative, campaign-like, but not totally campaign-like, story game that's also an adventure game, that's a resource management game, that's a sort of an objective-driven game. You have to play it to really understand it. When you set the game out, you're like, there's a lot of pieces here, and I'm not sure this is going to mesh well, and yet it does. It's like certain gameplay initiatives come from 5, 6, 7 different vectors of gameplay styles, and yet it all wraps together in something that's charming. Just charming. I mean, the book where you're traveling out, the risk that you're taking when you go out to travel versus when you go back to town, and the more time you spend in town, the less you're getting out there getting stuff and earning points and trying to do interesting things. I don't know. It really hit me right. I hope that this is the beginning of a great line. I do wish it had more solo rules, but I really think it's best with 2 or 3 to play it. I wouldn't play it with less, without some sort of like custom automa solo play thing. Whatever. Number 3 is Near and Far. Okay, number 2 is probably what a lot of people's number 1 would be, as I've seen. It is Gloom Haven. Gloom Haven is a train case, a veritable suitcase of gaming goodness. It is a game that you could take on an island and play and play and play and play and play and play. It's got such a clever combat mechanism. It is really immersive, and the campaign is the best of the bunch so far. Caveat, I haven't played Seventh Continent. That's next year. But I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it enough to buy 2 copies of it. How weird is that? That's crazy. Because one I wanted to play with friends, and one I wanted to play solo. And the updated version does have some solo missions, but I really like it. I really find it immersive. I think it really is an RPG in a box, but not, but one you can play by yourself. So definitely number 2. Could have vied for number 1 if it wasn't for one other game that just blew me away. But yeah, number 2 is Gloom Haven. Number 1. Okay, we're down to my favorite game, my top game of 2017. And as I thought through all of these, and believe me, there's a ton of great games. I really wish I could have put photosynthesis on this list for its imaginative creativity. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which I think is a great little dice game. There's a lot of ones that, if I did creative lists or unique lists, there's a lot on there. And there might be some that came out that I haven't played yet. Who knows? Legacy of Dragonholt, Expanse, Magic Maze, the list could go on. But there was one game that just hit it for me, was the one. And absolutely, positively, without regret or restraint, I would say that the number 1 game of year for me is Enemy Coast Ahead Doolittle Raid. I found this next extension of the game is just phenomenal. absolutely phenomenal. The Doolittle raid and all that went on around it, and we've seen the cinematic movies and Hollywood's version of it, and reading through various books on it and stuff, but nothing really captured it. It took all of the pieces and distilled it down to a game that really makes you feel like you're there. Not only that you're there, but you have to make the choices they made. You have to take the risks that Doolittle made. You have to walk through this entire situation. And when you do, you will feel it. You will feel it in every aspect of play. Dam Buster Raid, the original Enemy Coast Ahead, was great. It was really immersive. It really was the first one that got me going, wow, I really like this. It's both of the games have been dinged for being like, I don't get to make many choices. It's kind of game drives itself, and I can see that because it isn't open-ended. It's not like you get to just go pick, hey, instead of Tokyo, I'm just gonna bomb like Des Moines, Iowa. I don't know, but I don't agree with that. I think that I love the fact that in this game you have entire phases of the game that absolutely richly and immersively map to what had to happen in each and every phase of this raid that got pulled off, basically for PR, basically for morale. It wasn't to, this was, as you read up on the raid, this was, a lot of gutsy guys doing a lot of gutsy things to try to just boost spirits. But it matters. It matters in every planning, your naval aspect, your flight, the over the target, and then the landing and everything. Everything is immersive. Everything makes you feel like you carved your own portion of history. And even though all those other 9 games were great and all had their place, nothing came close to my enjoyment. Well, okay, maybe Nemos War, but nothing, even then, it was just a large gap between that and Enemy Coast Ahead Doolittle Raid. And that's it for this edition of the top 10 games of 2017 here on Harebrained Games. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time.